the pandemic has, for New United Methodist Church, impacted us because on the fly we had to figure out how to utilize technology that we hadn't been using before. It's technology that we talked about using, but sometimes we talk about things and it takes a lot of committed meetings, and a year or two later, and then it produces. But the pandemic caused us to have to do what we always talked about doing right away. And so as a pastor, I had to take a quick assessment of my church and figure out what everyone could do versus what I may have wanted them to do, like, for instance, Zoom. And I realized everyone in my church couldn't use Zoom. The best medium for worship for us was a telephone conference system, because more people had access to a telephone than the people who had access to a platform that they could utilize Zoom on. And plus, we didn't have time to do any training. I had to figure out from that Friday to that Sunday, how was I going to get, 130 people on, connected for worship on Sunday and make it all make sense for them.
It's forced a new playbook on us. From day one, we had to sort of rewrite the script on so much of what we do, starting with worship and meetings. I really appreciate what Corey was saying about the fact that I might be able to, or some of our leaders might be able to figure out technology was not good enough. We had to find technology that certainly the lion's share of our members and friends could participate in. And so there was an initial technology shuffle to try to find new ways to do just about everything. And some of that involved old ways. I put out 3 things to the congregation, to our leaders when all this started. I said, I want to find a way to get connected, or to connect with every member, every household in the congregation every week. And I think the best way to do that's by phone. And so we got that ramped up. There was a wonderful person in the room, our leadership team, who took that ball and ran with it immediately. The second thing is that we haven't been as good at doing is, I wanted everybody to get away from the cancellation mindset and into let's find other ways to do things. And I've been doing those. We have Zoom meetings mostly with leaders and members, and then we worship largely on YouTube live. But there have been very few meetings that have been member initiated. A lot of our leaders, finance teams, trustees are still canceling, haven't figured out a way to get the choir together. So we're still struggling with that. And so one of the big things that's changed is so many things have simply stopped. And I think it's starting to spread more to the congregation, this idea that we're in for the long haul and that everyone's involved in this new way of being church.
Well, I have to admit, the social distancing requirement instituted as a result of the COVID-19 or coronavirus challenge has affected, changed, and shaped my ministry in many different ways. For one, I have to say my heart aches for those persons who have loved ones in nursing homes and cannot touch them. My heart aches for those persons who've had to leave loved ones in the hospital knowing that they will be unable to visit them, or maybe not even have contact with them for several days. However, God always leaves a bright side. God always provides a rainbow. They've opened up new ways to worship with persons that were reluctant to worship before in person. Maybe it was due to their own personal reasons, maybe personal obligations, maybe it's been their work, or even injury or illness. It's also opened up opportunities for worship with persons that have been able to cross ethnic as well as geographical boundaries.
So normally my job is very administrative. I have an associate pastor of visitation. Now I find myself doing half time worship planning and half time pastoral care. And that's all mostly on the phone. And what I found increasingly is that there are long phone calls. When I say hello to somebody, it's a half-hour phone call because they're dying for companionship and a connection to the church. And they're wonderful, wonderful calls. And I find myself just trying to offer hope, because I think up till Easter, everybody was pretty good. After Easter, we're all hitting the skids and it's really tough. So I spend a lot of time on the phone talking to people and stay connected that way.
We have a lot of elders in our church. And so just like Pastor Barry, we've had to do teleconferences, but in my dynamic, we've also have a lot of college students that go to my church, and a lot of young adults, and they're on Facebook. So we've been doing Facebook Live, which has reached people that otherwise we would not have reached if we just were having Sunday morning service. So we have reached people also who had Metropolitan and St. Mark as their home church. And because they had moved out the area, they're able to now to reconnect to the church and also give to our church through online giving. So once again, some of the things that we have also been talking about doing, we've had to do because of this virus, this pandemic has pushed us into areas of discomfort, but in a good way, because it's allowed us to do the things that we have been talking about doing. And the technology is also helping our elders to do stuff that they've never done before. So now they're getting on Zoom and they're excited about it, and they're excited about being able to see the service on Facebook Live, and they're excited about it. So it's been an interesting and an exciting time.
I mean, the orders to stay at home as much as possible have certainly changed pretty much how we organize and gather and function. In some ways, some of the most challenging has been caring for some of our most vulnerable members. And by that, I mean, we have a handful of people in the church that depend on other church members for rides and trips to the grocery store and medical appointments and that sort of thing. And with our folks, basically not going out very much, it's been harder to meet their needs. So yesterday I used Uber to get one of our folks around from her, her house to her blood work to her grocery store and back again. It's been easiest, of course, to connect with our core folks who are the most motivated to stay connected. And I worry that we are not as connected to our, our folks who aren't right at the core of the leadership and the service life of the church. And that's really hard to gauge. And I think one of the most things to be celebrated, one of the most amazing things is how quickly our folks, regardless of age, have found ways to adapt to all of this new technology. People have learned Zoom. People have figured out how to get YouTube onto their television using their Comcast. And, that has been remarkable.
And I came up with 7 areas that I thought I could see noticeable change. And one area was certainly worship. The next area is Christian education. The next area is pastoral care, evangelism, missions, and generosity. There were 7 areas that we tried to target to make it easier for people to connect with the life of the church. As far as evangelism is concerned, we try to advertise everything before it actually comes up. Even when it comes down to invitations to Zoom, we want to make those available not only to our members, but also those that might be interested in a Bible study or maybe interested in a game night. So we ask those persons to send in their requests for an invitation to our email at the office. We still have our AA who is working remotely at home. So she's able to also take the prayer requests and send them to me for pastoral care as well. As far as missions is concerned, we developed what we call a community food pantry and library. And what we've done is we put a cabinet outside of the church in the front, and we've advertised for those families that are in need to please come by. We put baby food in there. We put anything, non-perishables, and we've put children's books in there. And we found that that's been very successful. People have been coming by and taking, and this is the part, taking what they need. It has not just everything just evaporated in just one day. But we see that there's been a trickling of people coming in and taking what they need.
That I'm not able to do the high touch ministry that I'm used to being able to do. I'm very involved with the pastoral care, and it's difficult when you can't be present for people. So I've had to find ways to try to work around that as best I can, using telephone and email and text message and whatnot, in order to make sure that I'm keeping up with what's going on in the life of the congregation. I didn't have a lot of resistance for stopping. I think people were scared enough to really understand that to be safe they needed to quarantine. But when it came to attending, so to speak, the worship services, they've really, a lot of them that I wouldn't have expected, have really taken to it. I've gotten a lot of response from folks who have watched the videos, and then we also do a 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings, a call-in using a conference call service where people who don't have access to the internet can call in and just listen. And basically I do a prayer, the scripture, and a message, and then we chat for a little while afterwards. So they've really taken to it, and I really haven't had a lot of pushback from it.
The fact that our ministry it's more dispersed now, whereas in comparison to being localized. And so we've been blessed in a lot of ways because my primary appointment is evangelism and church renewal ministry within a church. And so in the evangelism compartment, we had a team that already worked with audiovisual, and we have an audiovisual guy, we have a social media management team. And so that's been a blessing in a lot of ways, because once this happened, we were able to just say, okay, let's increase that. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we did that in a moment. But, in general, just being more dispersed versus localized. So the second half of our ministry is church renewal. With that, I'm serving 3 local congregations. Now, that's been a little more difficult because that is very localized ministry where you're in those churches a lot of older congregation, which in general, you're having to figure out ways to minister to them throughout this. But I would say in the evangelism area of what we do, it's been helpful to already be equipped. We felt equipped already. In the church renewal side, it's been difficult because a lot of that does have to do with being hands-on with people, the way that Pastor Sally said. So
definitely shaped the way that we are doing ministry in several different ways. First off, the worship services have morphed into something different. When we had them in person, the thing I noticed about myself is that I used to think of a sermon as more of a monologue, wishing it were more dialogical, but still, because of the medium, it tended to be more of a monologue. But what I've realized in trying to preach to a camera is that I relied heavily on people's facial expressions, their body language, to get that kind of feedback. And so, if people kind of cocked their heads, I thought, well, they're not getting it. I might, go a little deeper or explain it in a different way. Or if people were nodding their heads, I could kind of get a sense that they were getting it. If people started looking down, I thought, oh, got to speed through this section. I'm not keeping their attention. And that's been really hard then to preach to a camera because there's not that kind of feedback.
It's just ways of trying to get people connected. So we've got Bible studies that have moved off of meeting in the building to meeting online as well. And we hosted a drive-in prayer service on Easter Sunday just to get people to see each other and be able to wave at each other, even though they couldn't really interact in other meaningful ways. But it's been a challenge to find that connection, and I think mostly we've tried to do that via phone. That's been the easiest way to reach the bulk of our congregation. And so we've set up the same thing that Amy discussed, a phone tree basically, where volunteers would take a chunk of names and then make phone calls each week, and that rotates. And so different people are getting called, but just about every week or so, somebody gets a connect so that we can continue to follow up and see how they're doing. It's been good in terms of getting prayer requests, finding out what needs are, and helping to address some of those. We've also had people step up who have received surplus checks to donate them to support families in need during the pandemic. So I think the biggest challenge has been connection, but people are resilient. They'll find ways to do that even in the midst of being shut down, and that's been the case here.
It's changed, and we do a lot of virtual. However, we also do a lot of the phone connection. Majority of our meetings are conference call. The Bible study is virtual. We have a daily prayer meeting. That's through conference call. We've instituted, as what we heard from my other colleagues, the visitation team, where we call every week, and that rotates. We also do drive-bys, where we drive by and we wave, just to let them know that we're still here and we love you, and just to see a smile and see them come out of their house and they get to see us. Again, the Bible study is through Zoom, prayer is through the conference call, but then it's changed, and actually our young people are loving that I'm doing confirmation through Zoom. They just think that's the best thing since sliced bread. I find the challenge has been for those who don't have internet access. That's been the biggest challenge. And for those who are the most vulnerable, who actually don't have long distance. And the cell phone that they have are the cell phones that have the limited minutes on them. So it has become, as Pastor Amy and Pastor Tom said, persons contact us and let us know who they are. And there's not a lot, but they're just as important. So they tend to get a personal phone call from me every week.
Thank you for sharing this exploration of unique times. Our sincerest thanks to the 12 pastors serving in the Peninsula Delaware Conference for offering their thoughts. So now it is your turn to answer for yourself and to discuss with your church leaders the question, how has the global effort to combat the COVID-19 coronavirus affected and changed your ministry? Future interviews will discuss related questions about the nuts and bolts of worship during this time and how they have involved others in worship while maintaining social distancing. The final question in this series will explore what parts of today's changes might continue into the future. Again, thank you for watching. God bless and stay safe.